Welcome to Love Punch, where I'm challenging leaders, entrepreneurs, and creatives to make a lasting impact. I'm your host, Ruby Fremont, and I'm here as a catalyst for you, the new generation of thought leaders. Join me each week as I dive into raw conversations with real impact makers. Hey everyone, I am back with one of my favorite human beings. She's been a guest on our show before, and I'm excited to have her here again, Mary Shores. Now, Mary Shores spends her career as an author, speaker, and entrepreneur, generating positive and pragmatic solutions for people who are freaking out. Mary blends personal experience with her extensive knowledge of neuroscience and human behavior to guide businesses and individuals to defeat the freak out and create their ideal life. Mary, welcome back to Love Punch.
Hey, Ruby, I'm so excited to see you again today.
Me too. And crazy enough, the timing of this. So we are now speaking post 10-day ayahuasca retreat.
Yeah, that's right. So I definitely I am so excited and I'd love to share about my 5 ceremonies that I had while I was in Peru.
Yeah. So to our listeners, ayahuasca is a type of plant medicine. You'll be learning a little bit more on today's show. You've probably heard people in the personal development industry talk about this, leaders, celebrities. A lot of people are heading into plant medicines as tools. I have as well. So Mary, I'm like super stoked to hear about your experience with it because for one, I feel like maybe like 10 years ago, this might've been something you wouldn't have considered.
You know, it's really interesting. So I have actually been researching ayahuasca for over 6 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I started researching it was probably 2011 or 2012. And so, I was going through a lot of shifts during that time. And when I heard about it and I found out that if someone has a lot of trauma in their past, it could be something that could really help unlock that trauma from their body and
Mm-hmm.
give them some freedom for especially PTSD. And so I recognized that I had a lot of PTSD, or at least had been living with a moderate level PTSD for my entire life. And so I researched it for 6 years. I definitely knew that there was some risks. So I felt like I really wanted to understand what I was getting myself into. And then boom, I was ready to go. And it was super important for me to go to Peru and want to do it with in the original like indigenous type of experience that you can have. So I literally went with a group of 8 other people. It was fabulous. And we got dropped off on the side of the road. So we went to Iquitos, Peru, and they measure things by mile markers. So it's not like exit ramps like what we have, but we went to like kilometer marker 48 and they drop you off on the side of the road. And then we walked 2 miles through the jungle to get to our retreat center.
Wow.
Which this place had, I'm really selling this. This place had no electricity, no running water. The grounds were absolutely breathtaking. We stayed in these huts that are called tambos, and the huts are on these like probably, I would say 15-foot stilts, just a basic hut building that was really, really nice, open air, but mosquito netting on the sides. And then all I had in my room was a twin size bed that had a mosquito netting around it, a very basic, like 4-legged table, didn't even have a drawer, and a candle.
Wow.
And then I did have a bathroom, but it was more of like an outhouse little thing behind my tambo. And it's not a flushing toilet. So what you would do is you would pour water in it and then the water would manually flush the toilet. And you also couldn't use toilet paper. So I kept forgetting that. And I would have to like fish mine out with a stick.
Oh my God.
So, I know. Believe me, if that was the worst of how this story gets,
right.
Good. But ayahuasca involves buckets and vomiting, diarrhea. And
so let's like backtrack a little bit for the listeners who aren't as familiar with ayahuasca. So why don't you share like what really called you to it in the first place? You said you were researching it for 6 years. So what called you to even do that?
6 years. Well, a couple of things. Number one is, I don't know, ever since I was a kid, I wanted to be an anthropologist, and I would also say that this crosses along with the spiritual path that I've been on for quite a long time. And even, someone that always wanted to have a mystical experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been on breathwork retreats, I've been on yoga retreats, I've been on meditation retreats that are specifically focused and geared towards learning how to have an out of body experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so and people that have done ayahuasca, they'll tell you they just feel called. They feel called to this path. And so I definitely felt very called to do it. And then when I was doing all of my research and I started to understand more and more about how trauma affects the body. And one of the people that was a big influencer on my decision was Dr. Joseph Tafur. And he is an MD, and
Mm-hmm.
he's an American, he's a Colombian American MD,
Mm-hmm.
and he is also a shaman. And when he went through his shamanic training, what he saw in his visions was how, we have the DNA structure,
Mm-hmm.
and he would see these dragons attaching themselves to the DNA. Now, what he understood from the plant medicine is that the dragons are actually the traumas that happen in our lives. And we understand that, our bodies are libraries, and all the things that are happening to us throughout our experience are being lodged into our cellular memory. And now, we see how it's changing our gene expression. So what he's seeing is these dragons that are getting stuck into the DNA.
Mm-hmm.
That is how trauma is changing our gene expression. And as a matter of fact, earlier today, Ruby, I just was Googling this, and there was a lot of articles when I said, how does emotional trauma change gene expression? And
Mm-hmm.
so we absolutely know that over time, like 10, 20, 30 years, these traumas that you go through will manifest itself into, especially like autoimmune disease, cancers, fibromyalgia, MS, Parkinson's, all of these things. We don't understand fully the psychological component. And
Right.
so the way that I understood ayahuasca and the way that I experienced ayahuasca myself was like it went in and it took out those dragons.
Yes.
It removed those dragons on my DNA, and it reset. Like I really had a real time experience of like the neurological rewiring, but also the traumas leaving my body was extremely intense. So, to answer your question, what I went there for was looking for healing.
Mm-hmm. And this is a journey that so many people are on, and I think especially in leadership, right? Like, for example, in order to be a standout leader, we need to first lead our own lives. And so
Mm-hmm.
much of that starts with us on our own healing journeys. And I think what I like to call falsified leaders. Falsified leaders are the leaders who have yet to walk their own journey. They have yet to walk their own walk. And they're the ones who are delivering these like misconstrued construed messages because they're coming from a place that's misaligned. And so I feel like, I mean, the way that I look at plant medicine is it's a tool for us to start healing within, which is what you're saying, but
Mm-hmm.
also to like deepen our own journey so we can then deepen our own stance as leaders, you know?
Yeah. And if I could just speak on how I actually experienced some of this while I was in ceremony, because it's really, you don't know what you're going to get. And
Right.
and with the plant medicine, whether it's ayahuasca or whether it's something else, because
Mm-hmm.
there's lots and lots of choices,
Yes.
and what you did was not the same as what I did. And the thing is that there is some sort of intelligence that the medicine knows what you need. And
Mm-hmm.
so just initially on the first ceremony that I had, I experienced this barrage of thoughts. So as an entrepreneur, you know what that's like to just constantly
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
The
The
mind
mind.
doesn't, the
I
mind.
nicknamed it the mind fuckery.
Yes. So That I experienced that times 1,000.
Wow.
And it was just this attack of this thought barrage.
Mhm.
And it was really, it seems like it would be that not that big of a deal, but it was so overwhelming. And what I realized the next day was it was gone. And
Mhm.
so what the medicine was doing was making it go away. I
Mm.
mean, so I was having this experience. I'm experiencing like thousands of these thoughts, and because I was having 5 ceremonies, it really needed to do some reprogramming in my mind before I had the really extreme experience for the second ceremony.
Mhm.
And so that was emptying out all those thoughts. And it's been 2 weeks, and I'm literally, the monkey mind is just gone.
Right.
The mind chatter is just gone. Now, I fully believe that integration is extremely important. And if
Yeah.
I come back and I get into the same patterns that I was already in, then it's just going to be a matter of time before, that those old habits come back.
Mhm.
But for now, so far, I'm happy to say that that mind chatter, and that was the first part of the leadership component, is because with a quieter mind I can tap into my own intuition better. And I was shown on the medicine throughout the week, and probably a lot in my second ceremony, that a large part of my thought process is fear based.
Mhm.
And
As with the
so,
rest of the population, I believe.
well, and here's why this is so interesting for someone like me, because, I'm an empowerment teacher, I'm a
Mhm.
spiritual leader. And what I learned was that a lot of people who have trauma in their backgrounds, such as I do,
Mhm.
can become successful riding on the back of fear.
Mhm. Yeah, I
Like you
agree.
have this fear that puts you in a survival mode, and your motivation to succeed is in these underlying fear based thoughts that, to be honest, Ruby, I didn't even know they were there. Like
Yeah,
I
we
had
think we're
no
going
idea.
after something greater, but really it's still the fear that is pushing us and that is driving us. The thing that I never want to be this again, or I never want to go through this again. So I'm going to go after this. And although you have a vision, which you clearly had, it's still like that underlying motivation of like, but I also don't want that.
And you can do great work in the world. I
For
mean,
sure.
I'm not saying that fear is the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, but the scale in my case had tipped, where I
Mm,
certainly had more fear-based thoughts than what was healthy for me.
yeah.
And so I feel like, I was shown that, I was working with it during the ceremonies, and it's just something for right now I just want to be aware of.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be aware of when I'm making decisions out of fear, and maybe what the other side of that looks like, to really be in an empowered decision making process, or saying, if I'm driven by fear, maybe I don't need that thing,
Yeah.
whatever that thing is.
Right. So under, you basically went into the ceremony, discovered that holy shit, I've been making so many of my decisions based on fear, which to me, as an empowered woman and having that realization, that in itself is such a major epiphany. I mean, where did you go from there? What happened next?
Well, so I would say that my understanding of that fear-based thinking was more of a takeaway. But
Yeah.
the big thing that happened for me in the second ceremony was literally when, people that have these type of plant medicine experiences will talk about an ego death.
Yeah.
And I had that to an extreme. Like I must have died 1,000 times. I mean, Ruby, I saw my body disintegrate molecule by molecule
Hmm.
and just poof off into the atmosphere. And I mean, I died. And, initially I had some sort of death ritual, but because I was so learned about the medicine, I
Hmm.
still had, as an observer, oh, this is an ego death. And it kind of laughed at me. Like,
Mm,
haha, you think it's going to be that easy? No, we're going to
right.
show you. And I literally died like 1,000 times. And when I finally got to this place where I accepted, and this was not a cognitive experience where I think I'm dead. I mean, like, to me, I was really gone. Like I had
Mm-hmm.
really experienced an actual death and had accepted that I was dead, and actually even thought, because it's a little bit of a, oh, what's the word? Like a little bit of a psychosis,
Mm-hmm.
where you're not really in your right mind. And so I was thinking that I was dead, and I got to this place where I accepted it. And then I started going to these other dimensions. And so this was maybe about an hour after the second ceremony had started. And I had felt, my body turn into vibration. And like I said, my body disintegrated. And, part of it was really pleasant. Like I became one with the universe, and people talk about being a drop in the ocean. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
definitely experienced that, and the interconnectedness of all things and all people. And
Wow.
that was like super cool. But the being dead part was
Not cool.
well, so and the best thing I can do to try to explain this is, if anyone has any familiarity at all with the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I believe that book is a guide or instructions of the afterlife, or how you move through these different dimensions of the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that that's very much what I experienced. So, there was the disintegration, there was the where you see the visions, like the fractal
Mm-hmm.
patterns and the very indigenous artwork kind of stuff. And then you go through a dimension past that, where you're more seeing things from a larger scale. Like I saw thoughts turning into matter. I
Right.
understood 1000% completely that we are in fact creating our own reality with
Mm-hmm.
with our thoughts. I went through where, like, I could have that sort of life review, where if I tuned into the awareness of my son, then all of a sudden I could feel all of his suffering. And
Mm-hmm.
by the way, I mean, this ceremony went on for about 6 hours, but when I was on this other side,
Yeah.
in this other dimension, it was an eternity.
Right.
And it was also like multiple eternities happening all at once, because the experience is very overstimulating. And I think what it's doing is it's lighting up so many areas of your brain at once. So you're really experiencing a lot of things all at the same time. But when I got to about 3 or 4 dimensions away, because I would pass through to another dimension and another dimension, I eventually got to a place where there was literally zero frame of reference to being human at all. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, literally, if somebody would have shown me a human, I might as well have been looking, I wouldn't have even recognized what that is.
Right.
It was that strange. And most things we have a frame of reference for, like we have a frame of reference for God,
Mm-hmm.
whether we believe in a God or not, we still understand.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt this life and any memory of this life slipping away. And I remember one of the last things that I was trying to hold on to was remembering my children's names. And
Mm.
when that it was like that their names were just slipping away from me, like a
Wow.
stream of consciousness. And I just went into this void and just became a fractal of the universe. And I know that sounds really, really trippy, but I don't know what other words to say to describe it. It was fine. And I was there for what seemed like an eternity, until I was eventually starting to be shown human again.
Mm-hmm.
And I was given a choice. So the very, traditional near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I really believe that your type of experience that you have under the influence of plant medicine is really based on your own belief systems.
Mm.
So, like, for example, if somebody is Christian and they have a near death experience, then they see Jesus.
Right.
You know what I mean? So because I had more open spiritual beliefs, I think I had this trip through dimensions, because that's sort of what I believe anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really largely guided. I mean, everything that you experience is powered by your own subconscious. So,
Definitely.
right? So I think that's why I had this kind of experience. And I was given this choice about coming back, and I started to, and this is really cool, Ruby. I started to be shown the gifts that I asked for in this lifetime.
Wow.
So it was saying to me in this very goddess voice, remember, you asked for this. Like, you asked for this universal knowledge. You wanted to come here and spread this universal knowledge. So all the times when you're confused about your life and, you asked for
Mm-hmm.
this, and that was pretty cool. Right.
Yeah.
And then I was shown, like, when we'll say sayings like, send someone love and light,
Yes.
or send someone healing. And,
Yes.
I've said those words before, but Ruby, I saw how the bioplasmic streamers come off of the human body or the human aura. And when you have a thought like that about another person, I saw the beautiful, like, I mean, bioplasmic streamer is the only thing I can think, but this beautiful stream of colorful, vibrant energy that goes from one person and out to that other person who you're sending that to. So just know, like, when you say you're sending that person, and you can maybe even try to feel that from your heart, there really is something happening in another dimension that we can't see, but that doesn't mean it's not real.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went through this eternity period of time where I was just, whoever would come into my consciousness, I would just heal them. Like,
Wow.
whether it was one of my coworkers or a friend, or, one of my children, or an animal, or, the something in the planet. And as I was coming back in, I was also shown that I could make choices for the next portion of my life. Like,
Mm.
I could influence what my reality was going to be like when I came back. And so that was really a very cool experience. And then when it was time to get back into the body, and here's the really weird part, that
Mm-hmm.
if you already didn't think this conversation was strange enough,
Right. It's about to
but
get weirder.
it's about to get, like, it's about to go up a level. So you have this period of time where you become sort of multidimensional. And we've heard people say that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The crazy people on Coast to Coast talking about
Mm-hmm.
being multidimensional people, whatever that
Yeah.
means. But I understand it now, because what it is when you're sort of got your consciousness is half on that in this other dimension, but also here at the same time. And so as my consciousness was, like, working its way back into the body, I had some sort of somatic rebirth. So I'm
Mm.
I'm sort of figuring out how to get myself back into my body, which was not working out very well. And all of a sudden I felt myself giving birth.
Mm.
Now, I knew what this felt like because I've given birth,
Right.
but it literally, I just felt like I was in labor. And I couldn't conceptualize it because I am not fully human yet.
Yeah.
And Ruby, I kid you not, I, like, gave birth to myself. Is that a thing? Can you do
Apparently,
that? Is that
apparently it is a thing, and you just made it a thing, and now it's a thing.
well, so after you do your thing, and then the next day you have, like, integration
Mm-hmm.
circle and you share, right? It happened to another guy too. So I was like, all right, this really happened.
Yeah.
And he's a guy. And so our guide was actually over there doing midwifery with
Mm-hmm.
him. And I didn't know what was going on with them, but it's just, like, that's a common experience that people have after this symbolic ego death. They will have a rebirth.
Mm.
And so it was really fun because I was trying to figure out how to be in my body again. And I felt like a baby, like I didn't understand my surroundings and I needed to learn how to walk again. Like, when I went to the bathroom, the little gnomes, or whatever you call them, that are sort of, how Terrence McKenna says, the gnomes have found a new way to say hooray. They were all cheering for me because I had, like, done my toilet training.
Right.
That was really weird.
Yeah. So you went on this journey.
Hmm.
Um, you let go of a lot, felt like let go
Yeah,
of a lot,
absolutely.
and gained a deeper understanding of just how much power of creation you hold within you for your own life, which I think is such a beautiful thing. Because even, despite how far we get on our journeys, I think there's always this piece of hesitation, like this sense of hesitation, whether we want to admit it or not, or whether we're even conscious about it or not. And it's that hesitation of, like, I'm in control, but not of this. And we hold back. And so now that I'm just curious to know, now that you are post journeying. Uh, how do you feel about the control that you do have in terms of creating, moving forward?
You know, you're picking up on exactly the right thing, because one of the things that, I'm not telling you is how much the plant was showing me like I had no control.
Mm,
And that's a confusing message that I'm still sort of integrating, because we know that we're in control of our realities and we're creating our reality, but yet on some other level we don't have control the way that we think we do. And
mhm.
I think what that means is trying to control everything is different than creating. And
Yes.
trying to so I had a reading with a friend of mine
Mhm,
before I went, and she channels your guides,
mhm,
and she said, Mary, she said, it's like you have two people inside you. You have these two powerful beings inside of you. And she said, one of them is a tyrant. And one of them is this powerful warrior woman. And she said, you have spent a lot of lifetimes letting the tyrant be in control.
mm,
Now, believe it or not, I mean, tyrant sounds like a rough word, but I
mhm,
absolutely know what she meant, because, when I told you that I had all of this, that I was shown how much of my life is controlled by fear-based thinking,
mhm.
that's the tyrant. The tyrant is the voice inside of your head that's constantly telling you how terrible and shameful and
Yes.
unworthy you are. The
Mhm,
tyrant is every time when you let someone else who's just accused you of something or tried to make you feel like shit for
mhm,
whatever reason, that's their bullshit that they're
mm.
projecting onto you. And by
Yes.
the way, when I was on ayahuasca, when I was coming back, full circle from the dimensions, I was shown even how I projected my bullshit onto my son. It
Wow.
was very powerful.
That's
I was like,
powerful.
it really was. In fact, like the medicine really wanted me to remember that, because in my mind, it was like, write this down. And so I got out this like imaginary journal in my mind, and I like wrote these words down. But I was literally shown that conversations and concerns that I had over my son was like my own projected bullshit.
Mhm.
And it was like, wow, our minds are really, yeah, the tyrant, you
Yeah.
know? So this tyrant is the one who likes to control things.
Mhm,
The tyrant is the one who likes to criticize myself. And the warrior woman is the one who is the all powerful creator.
mm,
And it's, figuring out how to, and I'm not going to claim that I've figured this out yet, but I think that the more that I let go, because my mantra when I was going through this experience, because there's parts of it that are scary,
mhm,
my mantra is like, I surrender all. Like I just kept
mhm,
surrendering to the experience, knowing that it would all be okay. And so I feel like the medicine layer by layer builds on itself, so
mhm.
that when I got to that third ceremony, because we had five,
Right.
when I got to that third one, this is when I had a very physical experience. And I experienced this pain from head to toe. And it was like pain, like I was shaking because I was in so much pain. And
Wow.
Ruby, what I realized was, and the experience didn't start off that way, because my intention going into that ceremony was to open my heart.
Mhm,
And so it started off with this like beautiful vibration that was about from my throat, right at my,
mhm.
wherever your Adam's apple would be if you had one, down to my belly button. And
Yeah.
so right in that heart chakra area, I just felt this beautiful vibration. And a lot of people take ayahuasca and they talk about a body scan. And
Mhm,
so I felt that body scan happening. And it's literally like something's inside of you moving. And it's
mhm,
really interesting and pleasant. And I started crying, and it was just like as if something was crying me. And I
mm.
was crying for a couple of hours. And eventually another girl came over that was in the retreat, and she was like, "Oh, you're crying. Can we cuddle?" And we just laid there and cuddled. And I realized like this was happening, and it was all the sadness from my childhood. It was all the trauma from being separated from my sister when I was 3 years old, and her coming over was very symbolic in that moment, how I was
Mm.
grieving for my younger sister, who was
Wow.
just a newborn when we were separated.
Yeah.
And as the experience went on, and I started becoming riddled with pain from head to toe. I mean, the most intense physical pain. So I was not having this like other dimensional experience. I was very much having a physical
Yeah.
experience.
At this point, you're like in the body feeling it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I realized was all of the times that I had been so overwhelmed with life, and I would plead with God and just say, I mean, and this is going to be terrible to admit, but I'm being really honest here,
Mm-hmm.
that there are times in my life that I was so stressed out, so fed up, that I was ready to not be here anymore.
Yeah.
And I would say and plead, like, if I just got some terrible terminal illness,
Mm-hmm.
then I wouldn't have to take care of everybody else, and I could just go.
Yeah.
And what I felt was that manifesting inside of me. And what I realized was not only was my body releasing all of these traumas, but I was shown the damage that this self-hatred,
Mm-hmm.
and I was kept in this space until I just flipped completely, like, I love myself. I love life. Life is so precious. How could I have ever requested something like this upon myself, and this beautiful life that I've been given?
Mm-hmm.
How could I ever take that for granted? And so it was like the medicine was teaching me this valuable basic lesson, Ruby, that we should all just know.
Mm-hmm.
We should all just have this down by about the time we're like 6 months old, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that's our culture, now, and I understand that. But to be shown like in such this vulnerable way that I needed to love every part of myself, even the parts that I am judging myself, like there's
Mm-hmm.
too much fat here, or I don't like this part of
Yeah.
myself, or all of the guilt that I felt for things as a mother or things as a daughter, like
Mm-hmm.
how all of that has this impact
Yeah.
on my physical body.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And
I think I love that this brings it back into the body, and that Aya was a powerful tool for you and for many, many people, to be connected to that, because I think that, our Western medicine for the last few decades has spent a little too much time focusing on the mind, um, like separate from the body. Do you know what I mean?
mhm,
Like I used to have fibro, and I had really, really horrific fibromyalgia, PTSD, couldn't get out of bed. If you touched my arm, it felt like 1,000 knives. So many times I would just lay starfishing in my bed, and that was my life. And then I got better, and fibro hasn't come back, but I don't credit that to any prescription drugs. In fact, that did more damage than good. What I credit that to is me realizing the mind body connection, and how my body was holding trauma for all the pain that I was feeling emotionally and spiritually. So I love that you're bringing this home in such a powerful way, that this is a tool. This is a tool for people to like release that trauma. And it sounds like you really released a lot.
I did, Ruby, and I have a lot to say about it. And I just like, I'm not encouraging anyone to go out and do ayahuasca or any kind of plant medicine without their own research and maybe reaching out to somebody who's already done it. But I also want to say that, a lot of people do report having like a bad trip or a bad experience.
Totally.
And I
Yes.
think that if I didn't have the understanding about how the medicine worked, if I had not been in such a loving, caring environment, I mean, I was completely held in a loving space where I was at. I was 1000% safe in the
Mhm.
environment that I was at. And the finishing up of this physical one, this third ceremony is it's kind of embarrassing, but when the things come up and when you sort of have the realization, then you purge.
Right.
Purge can look like crying, it can look like yawning, it can be sweating, it can be vomiting, it can be diarrhea or needing to go to the bathroom. But
Mm-hmm.
what I realized was every sort of like memory or trauma that would come up, there would be an immediate purge afterwards.
Mm.
And after this very physical experience, I was just like, oh no. And I had to grab my bucket and get it underneath me because it was
Yeah.
coming out like a freight
Yeah.
train.
Yeah.
But all of my like retreat mates, because by
Mhm.
this time, I mean, we're just all so in love with each other, they were all cheering for me, and they were all like there for me. And when I laid down back on my mattress, our retreat host, Rak Razam, I kind of made a little holler for him to come over. And I just said, will you wrap your body around me? And, I think that this is important to say because this was done in a loving way, because there are sexual offenses that happen when people are going to, especially to the jungle. There's things that you could put yourself in danger with. And Rak came over and he just wrapped himself around me. And instantly I understood what was happening was that from the time I was born, my biological father is a nuclear engineer, and he was in the Navy when I was born.
Mhm.
And he lived out on a submarine.
Mm.
And he was there the entire time that my mother and my biological father were married. And so they got divorced, and I was sent to live with relatives. Well, long story short, I've never known him. I've never had a
Right.
relationship with
Yeah.
him. And so during this section of the experience, and I was really coming out of it, but I realized the impact on my life of never having a father. And
Mhm.
this is a big part of this fear-based thinking, because I was really felt how terrified I was when I was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, just this complete never knowing what it felt like to be
Yeah.
safe as a young person.
Right.
And that is what was the cause of the fear-based thinking. And we live in such a time where we're like second, third generation out from broken families.
Mhm.
And so if you are someone that, and it doesn't have to, your trauma doesn't even have to have a name.
Right.
Like whatever it is, because trauma is not necessarily about the thing that happened.
Yes.
Trauma is about the way that it shows up in your present day life and how it's affecting you.
How it's
And
impeding you, how it's impacting you, how it's holding you back. Yes.
absolutely. And how it's keeping you afraid. And
Mm.
so you remember when I told you that my thoughts were fear-based.
Mhm.
Well, now I can understand, like, why did I have this fear-based thinking? Because I never felt 100% safe and loved when I was at that very tender age of like birth to
Mhm.
6 or 7.
Wow.
So that was, but so when in the experience, when Rack came and he put his arms around me and he like stroked my hair, and he said things to me like, you're ready to blossom now, you're beautiful. It was like it was repairing that.
Mhm.
Like he was in a sense in that moment being my father,
Mm. Yeah.
which I don't mean to sound in a creepy way at all, but
Yeah.
like, no, it was totally, I'd never felt so much love from one individual in my entire life.
Yeah. I
But
think, Mary, I think if people were creeped out at this point, they probably would have like stopped listening maybe like 15 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. I think the people who are still listening are not creeped out, and instead, or rather, they are very interested. And, something I'd love to add about plant ceremony too, because this isn't an infomercial, everybody go do it, this is what you need to do. This is really just sharing from someone who's willing to share their experience with it, and their beautiful, powerful experience with it. And, plant ceremonies, plant medicine is used as a tool, and a very, very sacred, divine tool. And from my experience, it's something that you feel called to do. It's not like you call out for it. It's like Aya calls out for you. It's like the plant medicines call out for you, and you feel drawn to it for whatever innate internal reason. But it calls to you. So if you do feel the calling, I think, what Mary suggested and the way in which she went about finding her people to do this with, same with the way in which I've found my people to do this with, is do your research, talk to people, talk to the shamans, make sure that you feel really comfortable going into this, because this is a very, very sacred and intimate experience to share with people. So it's very important that you feel comfortable with the people that you've chosen, that you've done your research, and that you're doing it because you feel called to it versus just doing it for the sake of doing it. Because the other thing that Mary spoke about is integration, and so much of that is us. Like, we can still experience the same shit storms because we don't have control over everything, and we can still fall back into the same patterns. So like, the tool is only as good as the implementation that we do afterwards. And so if you're looking for a quick fix or a quick way out, plant medicine is not for you. But if you're really looking for something to deepen your expansion, then yes, do your research and see if you're called to it. Mary, do you have any like final thoughts on plant medicine for the people who are listening, or
I
anything that you
do.
want to share? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm working on a resource document. So I am going to be putting the resources, because I researched for 6 years,
Mm-hmm.
and I am going to be taking the best of the best. So it's just going to be a list of the books that I've read. It's going to be a list of the talks that I've watched, whether that be on YouTube or a documentary. I'm just going to put together some basic resource list. So if someone is interested and they want to start doing this research, I'll have that available. And Ruby, I'll give you the link for that, so people can
Perfect.
just take that and then build on it, share it with other people. If you have something to add, I'm totally open to finding out about your source. And the other thing that I just want to say about Aya is, I don't think it's any accident that all of a sudden, I mean, I feel like every time I turn around, there's someone that I'm having an Aya conversation with. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe, and I'm getting chills as I say this, but I truly believe that the plants have a consciousness that is very, very powerful, and that they are the ones that have felt the call to heal the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that as they are calling out to us, they want to change our consciousness. They want to raise our vibration, and they want to bring us to this level of consciousness so that we will stop fucking this earth up.
Yes.
And I'm not blaming anyone for it, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying it's anyone's fault, but the only way to truly get us to stop is we have to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to like get this level of understanding back. And I was watching a show the other day, and I really loved what the guy said, because if you look at the artwork and the mythology from ancient cultures, I'm talking Mesoamerica, Incans, Mayas, Hindu, Egyptian, all of this ancient tradition, they were tapped into something. And that
Mm-hmm.
really what you see. So when you have the vision on ayahuasca, you see those things, and all of a sudden they become real. Those people that were making cave drawings, they were putting what they saw.
Yeah.
And I think that they were, just like the druids, I think maybe they had a higher level of DMT just that was active inside of their system, to where they really did have these relationships with source. But we have created so much distractions in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
We have polluted our body so much so that our connection with the ability to be able to feel that source has been damaged. And
Definitely.
the plant medicine is calling out to us to heal ourselves so that we can heal the earth. And so that would be my final word for it. It's like it's all some sort of divine plan that feel really blessed that I got to be a part of. So
Thank you so much for sharing that, and for going there with me on this episode. Really, thank you. I mean, I think it's an experience that not a lot of people are open to speaking about so candidly, and it provides a lot of insight for those who are thinking of doing this as well. So, Mary, now that we're at the end of the episode, I want to ask, what is your love punch for this episode? The short and punchy mantra that you want to leave behind for everyone.
let's just do something I love a lot is to say awareness of your choices is the keys to freedom.
Awareness of your choices is a key to freedom. Yes. Yeah. I'm feeling that for sure. For sure.
Thank you.
So I will drop the resource link in the description for those of you who are interested. Mary, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Love Punch and just bringing your like raw and candid self and sharing this story. It's so good. And it's like one of those experiences that everybody wants to know more about, but people don't usually find the words to explain it. And you've done it so beautifully. So thank you.
You're very welcome. It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, I just want to say thank you for joining us on today's episode of Love Punch, where I'm challenging thought leaders, influencers, and entrepreneurs like you to make a lasting impact. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend and don't forget to hit subscribe and drop a review on iTunes. If you have any questions or just want to say hi, hit me up on social. My handle is I am Ruby. All of Mary's links will be in the description. And I will see you back here next week for a brand new episode of Love Punch.